Hello there, and welcome to Deep Sleep Seas. I'm so glad you found your way here tonight. Maybe you've had a long day, or perhaps you're the kind of person who likes drifting off to the sound of ocean mysteries rather than silence. Either way, tonight's journey is just for you. You've got nothing to do but rest. Let your breathing slow, your muscles soften, and your mind wander gently through warm tropical waters where the reef transforms after sunset. Because tonight we're not simply diving. We're drifting through the night reef to meet some of the ocean's most elegant and ancient residents, creatures that look more like flowers than animals, more like delicate works of art than living beings. We're spending time with feather stars, those graceful dancers of the dark reef who unfurl their arms only when the sun has set and the reef settles into its quieter rhythm. These are animals that have barely changed in over 500 million years. They existed long before the first forests grew on land, before the first fish crawled onto beaches, before dinosaurs walked the earth, and yet here they still are, drifting and feeding in the same patient way they always have. Feather stars are sometimes called crinoids, a name that comes from the Greek word for lily, and when you see them swaying gently in the current, arms spread wide like petals, you'll understand why early naturalists thought they were plants, but they are very much alive, very much animals, members of the same family as starfish and sea urchins, yet uniquely their own. But before we begin, if you find these stories soothing, consider subscribing so you don't miss the next journey into the ocean's quieter corners. And if you're still awake enough, let me know where in the world you're listening from and what time it is for you right now. I love seeing how this channel reaches people across different time zones, from evening wind downs to middle of the night companions. Now let's begin. Let's sink down below the surface and wait for darkness to fall. The reef looks different at night. During the day, it's a riot of color and motion. Fish dart between corals, parrotfish crunch on limestone, angelfish patrol their territories. But as the sun begins to set and the sky turns from blue to violet to deep indigo, something changes. The daytime residents settle into crevices and overhangs to sleep. The water grows quieter. And then, as if responding to some invisible signal, the night shift emerges. This is when the feather stars come out. All day long they've been hiding, tucked into dark crevices, rolled up beneath coral ledges, their arms coiled protectively around their small disc-shaped bodies. They are vulnerable during daylight hours. Fish might nip at their delicate arms, currents might batter them, predators might notice their bright colors against the reef, so they stay hidden, patient, waiting. But as dusk arrives and the light begins to fade, they stir. One by one they begin to move, slowly at first. An arm unfurls here, a cirrus grips there. They crawl out from their hiding places, using their feathery arms like stilts, pulling themselves across the coral with surprising grace. Some move only a short distance, perhaps from the shadowed underside of a coral head to its exposed top. Others travel farther, crawling along the reef face, searching for the perfect spot. A high point, an outcrop, somewhere exposed to the current where water flows freely and carries with it the microscopic food they need. And then they settle. They grip the substrate with their suri, those small jointed legs at the base of their body that look almost like roots or claws. Once anchored, they begin to unfurl. Slowly, elegantly, their arms extend outward and upward. 5 primary arms that quickly branch into 10, then 20, sometimes even more. In some species, a single feather star can have over 200 individual arm segments, each one lined with even smaller feathery projections called pinnules. When fully extended, they look like nothing so much as underwater flowers blooming in slow motion, like sea anemones made of lace, like living fireworks frozen mid-burst. The transformation is remarkable. What was moments ago a tight ball of coiled tissue is now a graceful fountain of feathery arms spread wide against the current. And the colors. Oh, the colors. Feather stars come in nearly every shade imaginable, deep crimsons and bright oranges, sunny yellows and rich purples. Some are pure white or jet black. Others display intricate patterns, stripes and spots and gradients that shift from one color to another along the length of their arms. In shallow tropical waters, they tend to be more vibrant, their colors bold and eye-catching. In deeper water, they fade to paler shades, soft creams and muted yellows, sometimes nearly translucent. Scientists aren't entirely sure why feather stars are so colorful. Some believe the bright hues serve as warning signals to predators. advertising that these animals might taste bad or contain toxins. Others think the colors help them blend into the equally colorful reef, a kind of camouflage through abundance. Or perhaps it's simply that there's no evolutionary pressure to be drab. In the dim light of the reef at night, color matters less than position and form. Whatever the reason, the effect is stunning. A reef populated by feather stars at night looks like an underwater garden in full bloom. Each feather star is relatively small. The central body, called the calyx or the calyx, is usually no larger than a coin, sometimes smaller. It's this disc-shaped structure that houses the animal's vital organs. The mouth sits on top, facing upward, surrounded by the bases of the arms. The anus is nearby, also on the upper surface. This is unusual among echinoderms. Most starfish and sea urchins have their mouths on the underside, facing the substrate. But feather stars are built differently. They are suspension feeders. They don't hunt along the bottom. They harvest food from the water itself, so their mouths face the current. Beneath the calyx, on the underside of the body, are the cirri.
These are short, jointed, leg-like structures
that the feather star uses to grip onto coral, rock, sponges, or other firm surfaces. They look almost like tiny grasping fingers, or the roots of a plant. Each cirrus is made up of small calcified segments connected by flexible tissue, allowing them to curl and grip with surprising strength. When a feather star wants to move, it releases its grip, extends its arms, and uses them to pull itself along. When it wants to settle and feed, it clamps down with its cirri and holds fast, even in strong currents. The arms are where the real beauty lies. Each arm is supported internally by a series of small calcareous plates called ossicles. These plates are jointed, connected by ligaments and muscles, giving the arms both structure and flexibility. The feather star can curl its arms, extend them, wave them gently, or hold them rigid. Along each arm, arranged in neat rows on either side, are the pinnules. These are the small feathery projections that give the feather star its name. They branch off the main arm like the barbs of a feather, creating that delicate plume-like appearance. And it's on these pinnules that the real work of feeding takes place. Covering the pinnules and the arms are thousands of tiny tube feet. These are not the same as the sucker-tipped tube feet of a starfish, designed for gripping and prying open shells. Feather star tube feet are delicate, hair-like structures coated in sticky mucus. They wave gently in the current, and when a particle of food drifts by, a flake of detritus, a microscopic organism, a fragment of plankton, the tube feet snag it. The mucus holds it fast. Then, in a coordinated motion that looks almost like a tiny conveyor belt, the tube feet pass the food particle to other tube feet closer to the arm. These in turn pass it along, moving the food steadily toward a groove that runs down the length of the arm. This groove is lined with cilia, microscopic hair-like structures that beat in waves, creating a current that pushes the food along. The cilia never stop moving. They work constantly, sweeping particles down the arm toward the mouth. As the food travels, it may be sorted. Edible particles continue onward. Inedible bits are swept aside and discarded. By the time the food reaches the mouth at the center of the disc, it has been filtered, sorted, and packaged into a tidy bundle ready to be consumed. This feeding system is incredibly efficient. A feather star can filter enormous volumes of water, extracting tiny bits of nutrition from what seems like empty ocean. They feed on zooplankton, phytoplankton, organic detritus, bacteria, anything small enough to be caught by their mucus-coated tube feet. And because they feed continuously through the night, they consume vast quantities. Some studies suggest that a healthy feather star might process its own body volume in food multiple times each night. They are living filters, recycling nutrients from the water column back into the reef ecosystem. The placement of the feather star matters enormously to its feeding success. These animals are careful about where they position themselves. They seek out spots where water flows consistently, bringing a steady supply of food particles, coral heads that protrude into the current, rocky outcrops at the edge of a drop-off, the tops of sponges or sea fans. Anywhere the water moves freely, they often position themselves at an angle to the current, their arms spread in a semicircular fan that maximizes the surface area exposed to the flow. It's a bit like a net stretched across a stream. The water passes through the arms, and the arms catch what the water carries. Interestingly, feather stars seem to be able to sense the current and adjust their position accordingly. If the current shifts direction, they may slowly rotate their body or reposition their arms. If the current weakens, they may move to a new location entirely. This requires a certain amount of sensory awareness. Feather stars don't have eyes, but they do have a nervous system distributed throughout their arms. They can detect touch, vibrations, chemical signals in the water, perhaps even changes in water pressure and flow. When touched, they react immediately, often curling their arms inward protectively or releasing their grip and swimming away. Yes, swimming. Feather stars are capable of swimming, though they do so only rarely and usually in response to a threat. The motion is mesmerizing. They coordinate their arms in a rhythmic wave, beating them up and down in alternating pulses. Half the arms sweep downward, while the other half sweep upward, creating a kind of undulating, pulsing motion that propels the animal through the water. It's not fast. It's not particularly graceful compared to a fish, but it works. The feather star can lift off the substrate and drift through the water, carried partly by its own motion and partly by the current. It looks like a flower tumbling through space, petals fluttering, arms rippling, and then when it finds a new spot or the threat has passed, it settles again, grips with its cirri, and resumes feeding. This mobility sets feather stars apart from their closest relatives, the sea lilies. Sea lilies are also crinoids, but they remain permanently attached to the seafloor by a long stalk. They are sessile, fixed in place for their entire adult lives. Feather stars, on the other hand, are free-living. They can move, they can crawl, they can swim. This gives them a significant advantage. If food becomes scarce in one area, they can relocate. If a predator arrives, they can flee. If conditions change, they can adapt. This freedom is relatively recent in evolutionary terms. Millions of years ago, all crinoids were stalked. Feather stars evolved to break free from that constraint, and in doing so, they became far more diverse and successful. Even so, feather stars retain a memory of that ancient stalk. When they are born, they go through a larval stage that eventually settles on the seafloor and attaches itself with a temporary stalk, just like a sea lily. The young crinoid sits there, anchored, growing and developing, but then, after a period of time, it detaches. The stalk is shed, the young feather star becomes mobile, crawling away to begin its independent life.
It's a fascinating bit of developmental history.
A brief recapitulation of the evolutionary journey from stalked ancestor to free-living descendant. The life cycle of a feather star begins, like so many marine animals, with a spawning event. Feather stars are generally either male or female, though a few species may be hermaphroditic. The reproductive organs are located in specialized structures on the arms, often in the pinnules nearest the body. When conditions are right, often triggered by environmental cues like water temperature or lunar cycles, the adults release their gametes into the water. Males release sperm, females release eggs. Fertilization happens externally, in the open water, a matter of chance and proximity. If an egg and sperm meet, a new life begins. The fertilized egg develops into a free-swimming larva. This larva is tiny, barrel-shaped, covered in bands of cilia that beat rhythmically to propel it through the water. It looks nothing like the adult feather star. It drifts with the plankton for a short time, perhaps only a few days, feeding on even smaller organisms or relying on internal yolk reserves. Then, when the time is right, it begins to search for a place to settle. It needs a suitable substrate, something hard and stable, a rock, a piece of coral, a shell. Once it finds a spot, the larva attaches itself using a small adhesive gland, and then the transformation begins. Metamorphosis. The larva's body reorganizes. A stalk begins to grow, elevating the developing crinoid above the substrate. The mouth forms. The arms begin to bud. The tiny creature takes on the classic crinoid form, a miniature sea lily with a stalk and a crown of arms. For a while, it lives this way, anchored and filter feeding just like its ancient ancestors did hundreds of millions of years ago. But then, as it continues to grow, something remarkable happens. The stalk weakens at its base. The young feather star prepares to break free, and one day it detaches. The stalk is left behind, and the now mobile juvenile begins its life as a free-living feather star. It crawls across the reef, still small, still vulnerable, but no longer bound to a single spot. Over time, it will grow. Its arms will branch and multiply. its colors will intensify, and it will join the nocturnal community of feather stars that emerges each night to feed and drift through the dark water. Feather stars face numerous threats. Despite their delicate appearance, they are not defenseless, but they are vulnerable. Fish find them tasty. Certain species of triggerfish, wrasses and emperors, are known to feed on crinoids. Sea urchins, surprisingly, are also predators, using their powerful jaws to bite through the feather star's arms. Even some sea stars, those close relatives, will prey on feather stars if given the chance. And of course, there are the inevitable accidents. Arms get caught in crevices. Currents batter them against rocks. Storms tear them loose from their perches. But feather stars have evolved a remarkable solution to the problem of lost limbs. They can regenerate. If a feather star loses an arm to a predator or an accident, it can grow it back. The process takes time, sometimes weeks or months depending on the species and the extent of the damage, but it works. The wound heals. Cells at the site of the injury begin to divide. New tissue forms. Slowly, the lost arm regrows, starting as a small stub and gradually elongating, branching, developing pinnules until it is nearly indistinguishable from the original. Even more remarkably, if a single arm is lost, sometimes two or even more arms will grow back in its place. This is how some feather stars increase their arm count over time. A young individual might start with 10 arms. After a few instances of damage and regeneration, it might end up with 15, 20 or more. This ability to regenerate is shared by many echinoderms, but feather stars take it to an impressive degree. They can regenerate not just arms but also pinnules, cirri, and even parts of their internal organs if necessary. As long as the central disc remains mostly intact, the feather star can recover from almost any injury. This regenerative ability is facilitated by specialized cells and tissues. At certain points along the arms, there are predetermined fracture planes where the arm can break cleanly if the feather star needs to shed it quickly. This is called autotomy, the voluntary loss of a body part. It's a defensive strategy. If a predator grabs an arm, the feather star can deliberately break it off, leaving the predator with a mouthful of wriggling arm tissue while the rest of the animal escapes. The detached arm may continue to move for a short time, thrashing and curling, further distracting the predator. Meanwhile, the feather star swims or crawls away to safety, and over the coming weeks it grows a replacement. Some species can even regenerate their visceral mass, the cluster of internal organs including the digestive system. If the organs are damaged or lost, certain feather stars can regrow them entirely within days or weeks. This is an astonishing feat of biological engineering, one that scientists are still working to fully understand. The mechanisms involve stem-like cells, precise genetic signaling, and the coordinated growth of multiple tissue types all at once. It's a reminder that these ancient animals, despite their simple appearance, are capable of incredibly complex biological processes. But feather stars are not alone on the reef. In fact, if you look closely at a feeding feather star, really closely, you might notice that it's not actually alone at all. There are often tiny passengers living among its arms: small shrimp, miniature crabs, even fish. These are not parasites. They are commensals, organisms that live in close association with the feather star and benefit from the relationship without harming their host. And the diversity of these little residents is astonishing. Perhaps the most famous of these are the crinoid shrimp. These are tiny, delicate shrimp that live their entire lives on feather stars. They are so well camouflaged that even an experienced diver might look directly at a feather star and not notice the shrimp clinging to its arms. The shrimp match the color and pattern of their host almost perfectly. If the feather star is bright red, the shrimp is bright red. If the host is yellow with purple stripes, the shrimp is yellow with purple stripes. This mimicry is so precise that each individual shrimp seems custom-tailored to its specific feather star. How do the shrimp achieve this?
It's not entirely clear.
Some researchers believe the shrimp can alter their coloration over time to match their host, a slow physiological change driven by diet or hormones. Others think the shrimp may select a feather star that already matches their natural color. Either way, the result is the same. The shrimp becomes nearly invisible, hidden in plain sight among the feathery arms. This camouflage protects the shrimp from predators. A fish looking for a meal sees only the feather star, not the tiny shrimp nestled within its arms. The shrimp benefit in other ways too. The feather star provides shelter, a safe place to live in an otherwise dangerous ocean, and it provides food. The shrimp feed on the same particles of plankton and detritus that the feather star catches. They pick through the mucus on the arms, scavenging bits that the feather star missed or doesn't need. In return, the shrimp may help keep the feather star clean, removing debris and perhaps deterring parasites. It's a mutually beneficial arrangement, though the feather star probably gets the lesser benefit. Still, the relationship persists, and crinoid shrimp are found throughout the world's oceans wherever feather stars occur. Squat lobsters are another common associate. These are small crustaceans, distant relatives of true lobsters, with flattened bodies and long, delicate legs, like the crinoid shrimp. Squat lobsters live on feather stars and match their host's coloration. They cling to the base of the arms or the central disc, gripping tightly with their legs. Some species of squat lobster are so specialized that they are found only on crinoids and nowhere else in the ocean. They have evolved entirely within this niche, shaped by generations of selection to be the perfect crinoid companion. Then there are the clingfish. These are tiny fish with a specialized sucker on their underside that allows them to attach firmly to surfaces. Some species of clingfish live exclusively on feather stars, using the sucker to anchor themselves to the central disc. They are so small and so well camouflaged that they are extraordinarily difficult to spot. A clingfish might spend its entire life on a single feather star, feeding on the same food particles, hiding among the same arms, never venturing more than a few centimeters from its host. Ghost pipefish also associate with feather stars, though they are not as tightly bound to them as the shrimp or squat lobsters. Ghost pipefish are elongated, delicate fish that drift among corals and feather stars, their bodies swaying gently to mimic the movement of their surroundings. When a ghost pipefish positions itself among the arms of a feather star, especially one that matches its own coloration, it becomes almost impossible to detect. The fish blends perfectly with the feathery backdrop, its body and finnage mimicking the shape and motion of the pinnules. Its camouflage taken to an extreme. All of these relationships, this community of tiny organisms living among the arms of feather stars, add another layer of complexity to the reef ecosystem. The feather star is not just a filter feeder, it's a habitat, a microenvironment, a small world unto itself. And this is true of many reef organisms. The ocean is full of these nested relationships, layers of dependency and association, organisms relying on one another in ways both obvious and subtle. Of course, not all interactions are benign. Feather stars do have predators. Fish, as mentioned, are the primary threat. But there are others. Some sea stars, particularly those in the family Asteroidea, will consume crinoids if they can catch them. Certain polychaeteworms are known to burrow into the arms and feed on the soft tissue inside. And there are parasites, tiny organisms that live within the feather star's body and siphon off nutrients. Feather stars, like all animals, are part of a complex web of life where everyone is simultaneously predator and prey, host and parasite, hunter and hunted. To defend themselves, feather stars rely on several strategies beyond regeneration and autotomy. Their nocturnal behavior is itself a defense. By hiding during the day and emerging only at night, they avoid many of the reef's daytime predators. Fish that hunt by sight are less effective in the darkness. The feather star's bright colors, which might seem like a disadvantage, may actually serve as a warning. Many marine organisms with bold coloration are toxic or distasteful. Feather stars may contain chemical compounds that make them unpalatable to predators. Research has suggested that some species produce polychaetads and other bioactive substances that could deter fish from eating them. A predator that takes a bite and finds the feather star unpleasant is unlikely to try again. Their ability to swim, clumsy though it may be, also provides an escape option. If a predator approaches, the feather star can release its grip and swim away, or at least swim upward into the water column, where it might drift with the current to a safer location. And of course there is the autotomy response. Sacrifice an arm, save the body. It's a costly defense, but it works. Better to lose an arm than to lose everything. Feather stars are found in oceans all over the world. They inhabit tropical reefs, temperate rocky shores, and even the deep sea. Some species are found in shallow water, just a few meters below the surface, clinging to coral heads in the warm sunlight, though these are the exceptions. Most feather stars prefer deeper, darker water, emerging only at night. Others live at depths of hundreds or even thousands of meters, in the cold, lightless zones where the pressure is immense and food is scarce. Deep-sea feather stars tend to be paler in color, often white, cream, or soft yellow. They are adapted to a world without sunlight, and bright colors serve no purpose there. Many deep-sea species also have longer arms and more delicate structures, adaptations to the low-energy environment. They spread their arms wide to maximize their filtering surface, catching every particle of organic matter that drifts down from the sunlit zones above. Life in the deep sea is slow and patient. Food is limited, growth is slow, but feather stars persist, filtering the dark water just as their ancestors did in ancient seas. Some deep-sea crinoids may even possess bioluminescence, the ability to produce light through chemical reactions in their tissues. While this has not been definitively proven for feather stars specifically, some of their close relatives, including certain sea lilies and other deep-sea echinoderms, are known to glow. The light is usually blue-green, the wavelength that travels best through seawater. If deep-sea feather stars do produce light, it might serve to startle predators, attract prey, or communicate with others of their kind. But this remains an area of active research, another mystery in the lives of these enigmatic animals. In shallow tropical waters, feather stars are most abundant in the Indo-Pacific region. Indonesia, the Philippines, Papua New Guinea, and Australia's Great Barrier Reef are particularly rich in feather star diversity. Some individual reefs may host dozens of different species, each with its own preferred depth range, habitat, and behavior. A single night dive on a healthy reef can reveal an astonishing variety. Red feather stars on one coral head, yellow ones on another, purple and white and orange, all spread across the reef like scattered blossoms. The Great Barrier Reef alone hosts an incredible diversity of crinoids. Researchers have identified scores of species there, with more being discovered and described all the time. Each species occupies a slightly different niche. Some prefer strong currents, others like calmer water. Some are found on hard coral. Others prefer soft coral or sponges or rocky outcrops. This niche partitioning allows many species to coexist in the same area without directly competing for resources. It's a common pattern in biodiverse ecosystems. The more niches that are available, the more species can fit into the community. Feather stars play an important ecological role in these reef systems. As filter feeders, they help regulate the populations of plankton and bacteria in the water column. They consume vast quantities of microscopic organisms, recycling nutrients and keeping the water clear. When they defecate, they release nutrient-rich waste that settles on the reef and fertilizes corals, algae, and other organisms. They are part of the reef's nutrient cycle, moving energy and matter from the water column to the benthos. They also provide habitat, as we've discussed, for a variety of smaller animals. The shrimp, squat, lobsters, and fish that live among their arms are themselves part of the food web, preyed upon by larger fish and contributing to the overall biodiversity of the reef. And when feather stars die, their bodies decompose and provide food for scavengers and detritivores. Nothing is wasted on a reef. Every organism, living or dead, is part of the cycle. But feather stars are more than just ecological cogs. They are also living links to the deep past. Crinoids as a group have been around for over 500 million years. They appeared in the fossil record during the Ordovician period, a time when the continents were still clustered together in unfamiliar configurations, when the first plants were just beginning to colonize the land, when the ocean was the undisputed center of life on Earth, and crinoids thrived. They diversified into thousands of species. They built vast limestone reefs from their accumulated skeletons. In some places, entire rock formations are made almost entirely of crinoid fossils, layer upon layer of ancient stems and arms compressed into stone. During the Paleozoic era, crinoids were among the most abundant animals in the ocean. Vast meadows of sea lilies covered the seafloor, their stalks swaying in the current like underwater forests. They filtered the ancient seas, feeding on the rich plankton blooms, growing and reproducing in numbers that are hard to imagine today. But then came the great mass extinctions. The Permian-Triassic extinction, the worst die-off in Earth's history, wiped out the majority of crinoid species. Entire lineages vanished. The seas emptied, but some survived, and from those survivors, the modern crinoids descended. The feather stars we see today are the inheritors of that ancient lineage, modified and adapted, but fundamentally similar to their Paleozoic ancestors. They still have the same basic body plan, the same filter feeding mechanism, the same pentameral symmetry. They are living fossils, not in the sense that they haven't evolved, but in the sense that they represent a body form and a way of life that has persisted, with variations, for an almost unimaginable span of time. Scientists study crinoids, including feather stars, to understand the evolution of echinoderms as a whole. Feather stars and sea lilies together form the class Crinoidea, and this class is considered the sister group to all other living echinoderms. That means that crinoids branched off early in echinoderm evolution, and all the other groups, starfish, brittle stars, sea urchins, sea cucumbers, evolved from the other side of that early split. By studying crinoids, researchers can learn about the ancestral traits that all echinoderms share and how different lineages modified those traits over time. One of the most interesting features of crinoids is their nervous system. Unlike vertebrates, echinoderms don't have a centralized brain. Instead, they have a distributed nervous system, with nerve cords running through their arms and a nerve ring around the mouth. In feather stars, there is a central nerve center on the upper surface of the disc, but it's not a brain in the way we understand the term. It's more like a coordination hub, a place where sensory information from the arms is integrated and motor responses are generated. The arms themselves have a great deal of autonomy. Each arm can respond to stimuli independently, curling away from a touch or adjusting its position in the current without waiting for instructions from the central disc. This kind of decentralized control is actually very efficient for an animal like a feather star, with so many arms and so many pinnules, all needing to coordinate their movements for feeding and swimming. A centralized brain might be a bottleneck. Instead, the distributed system allows for rapid local responses. If one arm is touched by a predator, it can curl away immediately while the other arms continue feeding. If the current shifts, the arms on one side can adjust their angle without waiting for the entire animal to reorient. It's a different kind of intelligence, one based on local autonomy and emergent coordination rather than top-down control. Feather stars also have a sensory system, though it's quite different from ours. They don't have eyes, but they can detect light. Photoreceptor cells are distributed across their skin, allowing them to sense changes in illumination. This is probably how they know when night has fallen, and it's safe to emerge from hiding. They can also detect chemicals in the water, using chemoreceptors to sense food, predators, or potential mates. They respond to touch, as we've mentioned, and they likely have mechanoreceptors that detect vibrations and water movement, helping them orient themselves in the current. All of this sensory information flows into the nervous system, where it's processed and integrated. The feather star doesn't think about what to do. It doesn't make conscious decisions in the way we do, but it responds. It reacts. It adjusts. And over millions of years, natural selection has fine-tuned those responses to be precisely suited to the animal's environment and lifestyle. A feather star is a beautifully simple and beautifully complex organism all at once, shaped by deep time into a form that works. The colors of feather stars, those brilliant reds and yellows and purples, are produced by pigments in the skin and in the underlying tissues. Some of these pigments are carotenoids, the same compounds that give carrots and flamingos their orange and pink hues. Feather stars obtain these pigments from their diet, concentrating them in their tissues. Other pigments are produced by the feather star itself, synthesized from basic biochemical building blocks. The purpose of these pigments is still debated. They may serve as warning coloration, signaling to predators that the feather star is toxic or unpalatable. They may help protect the animal from ultraviolet radiation, particularly in shallow water where sunlight penetrates. Or they may simply be a byproduct of metabolism with no particular function. Whatever their purpose, the colors are striking. And they vary not just between species, but sometimes even within a species depending on location, diet, or individual genetics. A population of feather stars on one reef might be predominantly red, while a population of the same species on a nearby reef might be mostly yellow. This kind of variation makes feather stars a challenge to classify and identify, but it also makes them endlessly fascinating to observe. Deep-sea feather stars, as mentioned, tend to be paler. In the deep ocean, where no sunlight penetrates, bright colors serve no visual purpose. Animals that are often white, translucent, or very dark, sometimes appearing black or deep red, which looks black in the absence of light. But some deep-sea animals produce their own light through bioluminescence, and this opens up a whole new realm of possibility. While we don't yet know for certain if feather stars glow, it's not out of the question. Other deep-sea echinoderms, including some brittle stars and sea cucumbers, are bioluminescent. They produce flashes or glows of blue-green light, perhaps to startle predators or to communicate. If deep-sea feather stars do the same, it would be a remarkable adaptation, another layer of complexity in their already intricate biology. Research into deep-sea bioluminescence is challenging. The deep ocean is difficult to access. The animals are fragile and often don't survive being brought to the surface. And bioluminescence is hard to detect and record in the field. But as technology improves, as submersibles and remotely operated vehicles become more sophisticated, we're learning more. Scientists have captured images and videos of glowing creatures in the deep sea, revealing a hidden world of light in the darkness. It's entirely possible that future expeditions will discover bioluminescent feather stars, adding yet another wonder to their list of remarkable traits. The relationship between feather stars and the reef is reciprocal. The reef provides the feather star with a place to live, a substrate to grip, a current to feed in, and the feather star, in turn, contributes to the health and diversity of the reef. Its feeding activity removes particles from the water, keeping it clear. Its waste fertilizes the reef. Its body provides habitat for other organisms. When it dies, its skeleton, made of calcite plates, may become part of the reef structure itself, contributing to the slow accumulation of limestone that builds reefs over centuries and millennia. Reefs are ecosystems built on such relationships. Every organism, from the tiniest bacteria to the largest predator, plays a role. Remove one piece, and the whole system shifts. Feather stars are not the most abundant animals on the reef. They're not the largest or the most conspicuous, but they are part of the web, and their presence matters. In a healthy, diverse reef, you'll find feather stars. Their absence might signal that something is wrong, that the water is too polluted, the current too weak, the habitat degraded. And this brings us to a more somber note. Reefs around the world are in trouble. Climate change is raising ocean temperatures, causing coral bleaching and die-offs. Ocean acidification is making it harder for calcifying organisms, including corals and crinoids, to build their skeletons. Pollution, overfishing, coastal development. All of these pressures are degrading reef ecosystems at an alarming rate. And when the reefs suffer, so do the feather stars. Their habitat disappears. The water becomes murky with sediment, clogging their feeding apparatus. The currents change, the food supply dwindles. Some species of feather stars are more resilient than others. Some can tolerate a wider range of conditions, adapt to different habitats, survive in less than ideal environments. But many are specialists, adapted to very specific conditions, and they struggle when those conditions change. We don't yet know how many feather star species might be threatened or endangered. Much of their diversity is still being discovered and described. There are likely species we haven't even identified yet, hidden in remote reefs or deep-sea environments, and some of those species may disappear before we ever get the chance to know them. But there is hope. Conservation efforts are underway around the world to protect and restore reef ecosystems. Marine protected areas are being established, giving reefs a chance to recover. Efforts to reduce carbon emissions, improve water quality, and manage fisheries sustainably are all helping. And as awareness grows about the importance of reefs and the diversity of life they support, more people are working to make a difference. Feather stars, those drifting flowers of the night reef, are part of what we're fighting to save. If you ever have the chance to go night diving on a tropical reef, take it. Wait until the sun has set and the sky is dark. Descend slowly into the warm water, your dive light cutting a narrow beam through the blackness. Swim along the reef face and watch for movement. Look for those delicate feathery shapes swaying in the current. When you find a feather star, approach slowly. Don't touch it, just hover there in the water. And watch how the arms move, each one independently, but all in coordination. Watch how the pinnules wave gently, filtering the invisible particles from the water. Watch how the animal reacts to your light, perhaps curling slightly, perhaps swimming away in that slow pulsing motion. And if you're lucky, if you look very closely, you might spot the tiny passengers. The shrimp that matches the feather star's color perfectly, moving delicately along the arms. the squat lobster clinging to the base, the clingfish hidden in the central disc, all of them living together, a tiny community in the midst of the vast ocean. It's a moment of connection, a glimpse into the intricate beauty of the reef, a reminder that the ocean is full of wonders we're only beginning to understand. Feather stars have been on this planet for over 500 million years. They survived mass extinctions, they adapted to changing oceans, they evolved from stalked, stationary ancestors into free-living, mobile forms. They diversified into hundreds of species, each one uniquely adapted to its environment. And tonight, as you drift off to sleep, they are out there on reefs around the world, emerging from their hiding places, unfurling their arms, and beginning their nightly ritual of feeding. They are patient, they are ancient, they are beautiful, and they are still here, still thriving in the places where the ocean is healthy and the water is clear. In a world that often feels chaotic and fast-paced, there is something deeply calming about feather stars. They move slowly, they feed continuously but without hurry. They don't chase or hunt, they simply spread their arms and wait for the ocean to bring them what they need. They are filter feeders in the most literal sense, letting life flow through them, taking what they need and letting the rest pass by. There's a lesson in that, perhaps, a reminder that not everything requires effort and striving. Sometimes you just need to position yourself well, open yourself to what comes, and trust that it will be enough. And they are resilient. When they lose an arm, they grow it back. When they are displaced, they find a new spot. When conditions change, they adapt. They have survived for hundreds of millions of years by being flexible, by being able to regenerate, by not being too rigid in their requirements. These are traits worth contemplating as you settle into rest: flexibility, resilience, patience, the ability to heal and regrow. These are the qualities that have allowed feather stars to endure through deep time, and they are qualities that can serve us well too. As you imagine yourself drifting down into the warm tropical water, hovering above a reef in the darkness, the only light coming from the bioluminescent plankton that spark and glow with each movement of your fins, let your mind settle on the image of a feather star. Its arms spread wide, filtering the night water, its colors muted in the dim light but still present, still beautiful. The gentle sway of the pinnules, the slow rhythmic movement of the cilia, the quiet work of feeding that has gone on, uninterrupted, for longer than we can truly comprehend. Let that image anchor you, let it calm you, let it carry you gently into sleep. The ocean is vast and deep and full of mysteries. Feather stars are just one small part of it, one thread in the immense tapestry of marine life, but they are a thread worth knowing, worth appreciating, worth protecting. They remind us that life takes many forms, some of them strange and unexpected. They show us that beauty and function can be the same thing, that the mechanics of survival can also be elegant and graceful, and they connect us to the deep past, to a time when the world was very different, but life was already finding ways to thrive. Tonight, somewhere on a reef you may never visit, a feather star is crawling out from beneath a coral ledge. It is moving slowly, deliberately, searching for the perfect spot. It finds an outcrop of rock, exposed to the current. It grips with its cirri, and then slowly, it begins to unfurl, arm by arm, pinnule by pinnule. It opens like a flower blooming in time-lapse, and when it is fully extended, it settles into its nightly routine, filtering the dark water, catching invisible particles, living the same life its ancestors lived in ancient oceans. And in the morning, as the sky begins to lighten and the first rays of sun penetrate the water, the feather star will sense the change. It will slowly curl its arms inward, release its grip, and crawl back to its hiding place. It will tuck itself into a crevice or beneath a ledge, coiling tightly, becoming small and inconspicuous. And there it will wait, patient and still, through the long day, until night falls again and it's time to emerge once more. This is the rhythm of its life, day and night, hiding and feeding, coiling and unfurling. A rhythm as old as the tides, as constant as the turning of the earth. The diversity of feather stars extends far beyond what we've already explored. Scientists have identified over 600 living species of feather stars, and new species are still being discovered regularly, particularly in remote locations and in the deep sea. Each species has evolved its own particular set of adaptations, its own way of making a living in the ocean. Some are tiny, with bodies no larger than a fingernail and arms that span just a few centimeters. Others are massive by comparison, with arm spans of half a meter or more, creating huge filtering surfaces that can process enormous volumes of water. The arms themselves vary tremendously between species. Some feather stars have just 10 arms, the basic 5 doubled through one branching. Others have 20, 40, even more than 100 arms, the result of multiple branching events during growth and regeneration. The arms may be thick and robust, designed to withstand strong currents, or they may be delicate and thread-like, optimized for catching the tiniest particles in calm water. Some species have arms that are all the same length, creating a uniform, symmetrical appearance. Others have arms of varying lengths, giving the animal a more irregular, asymmetrical form. The pinnules, too, show remarkable variation. In some species, they are short and closely spaced, creating a dense, plush appearance. In others, they are long and widely spaced, giving the arm a more open, delicate look. Some pinnules are thick and fleshy, others are thin and whisker-like. The differences reflect the different ecological niches the species occupy. A feather star that lives in strong current needs robust structures that won't be torn away by the water flow. A feather star in calm, deep water can afford to be more delicate, maximizing surface area without worrying about structural damage. The cirri, those small grasping structures on the underside of the body, also vary between species. Some feather stars have just a few cirri, perhaps 10 or 15. Others have dozens, arranged in multiple whorls around the base of the body. The cirri may be short and stout, adapted for gripping hard, smooth surfaces like rock, or they may be long and flexible, designed to wrap around irregular substrates like coral branches or sponge tissue. Some cirri have small hooks or claws at their tips, providing extra purchase. Others are smooth and rely on the strength of their grip alone. Even the body size and shape vary. Most feather stars have a small, compact central disc, but some species have enlarged discs that house more extensive internal organs. This might be an adaptation to store more energy reserves, allowing the animal to survive periods when food is scarce. Or it might reflect a larger reproductive investment, with more space dedicated to developing eggs or sperm. The thickness of the body wall also varies. Some species have thin, almost translucent bodies. Others have thick, heavily calcified bodies with dense skeletons that provide better protection. All of these variations, these countless small differences in form and function, are the result of millions of years of evolution. Each species has been shaped by its environment, by the pressures of predation, competition, and changing ocean conditions. The feather stars we see today are the survivors, the lineages that found successful strategies and passed them on to their offspring. And those strategies are still being tested, still being refined with every generation. The deep-sea feather stars deserve special attention. These are the species that live at depths below 200 meters, in the dimly lit twilight zone and beyond, all the way down into the abyssal plains thousands of meters below the surface. Life in the deep sea is profoundly different from life in shallow water. The pressure is immense. The temperature is near freezing. There is no sunlight, no photosynthesis. Food is scarce, consisting mainly of organic particles that rain down from the productive surface waters above. A slow, steady drizzle of dead plankton, fecal pellets, and detritus called marine snow. Deep-sea feather stars are adapted to this challenging environment in fascinating ways. Many have extraordinarily long arms relative to their body size, creating enormous filtering surfaces. Some species have arms that extend more than 50 times the diameter of their central disc. When spread wide, these arms can span a meter or more, an impressive feat for an animal whose body is no bigger than a coin. The long arms allow the feather star to maximize its chances of intercepting the sparse food particles drifting through the dark water. The arms of deep-sea species are also often more delicate than those of shallow water relatives. With less wave action and current in the deep sea, there's no need for heavy, robust structures. Instead, the arms are thin and flexible, sometimes almost skeletal in appearance, with minimal tissue connecting the calcified ossicles. This reduces the energy cost of maintaining the arms, an important consideration in an environment where every calorie counts. Many deep-sea feather stars are also able to move more efficiently than their shallow water counterparts. They can swim more effectively, using their long arms to generate thrust. This mobility is crucial in the deep sea, where suitable perches might be few and far between. A deep-sea feather star might need to swim considerable distances to find a rock outcrop or a piece of sunken wood to grip onto. Once it finds a good spot, it may stay there for weeks or months, feeding continuously, before moving on to search for new territory. Some deep-sea feather stars have also evolved associations with other deep-sea organisms. They may perch on glass sponges, those remarkable deep-sea animals with skeletons made of pure silica. Or they may attach to deep-sea corals, the cold water relatives of tropical reef corals that build structures in the dark depths. These associations are mutually beneficial. The feather star gets a stable perch in an otherwise muddy or unstable environment. The sponge or coral may benefit from having the feather star clean its surface or deter parasites, though this hasn't been studied in detail. The reproductive strategies of deep-sea feather stars are also adapted to their environment. In the deep sea, encounters between males and females are rare. The population density is low. Finding a mate is challenging. To overcome this, many deep-sea feather stars are hermaphrodites, possessing both male and female reproductive organs. This means that any two individuals that meet can potentially reproduce together, doubling the chances of successful fertilization. Some species may even be capable of self-fertilization, though this is less common and generally less successful evolutionarily because it reduces genetic diversity. The larvae of deep-sea feather stars face their own challenges. After hatching, the larvae must somehow find their way to the seafloor to settle and metamorphose. In the deep sea, the seafloor might be thousands of meters below the point where the eggs were released. The larvae drift with the currents, swimming weakly, until they sense the bottom approaching. Then they settle, attach, and begin their transformation. Many larvae never make it. They are eaten by predators, swept into unsuitable areas, or simply run out of energy before finding a place to land, but enough survive to maintain the population. One of the most intriguing aspects of deep-sea feather stars is their potential for bioluminescence. As mentioned earlier, some deep-sea echinoderms are known to produce light. Brittle stars in particular are famous for their glowing displays, flashing bright green light when disturbed. The mechanism involves a chemical reaction similar to that in fireflies, though the specific chemicals are different. If deep-sea feather stars possess similar abilities, it would open up fascinating questions about why and how they use light. Bioluminescence in the deep sea serves several possible functions. It can be used for defense, startling or confusing predators with a sudden bright flash. It can be used for offense, attracting prey with a glowing lure. It can be used for communication, signaling to potential mates or warning other members of the same species. Without more research, we can only speculate about whether and how deep-sea feather stars might use light. But given the prevalence of bioluminescence among deep-sea animals, it wouldn't be surprising if at least some species have evolved this ability. The fossil record of feather stars and their relatives tells a story of incredible longevity and resilience. The earliest crinoids appear in rocks dating to about 480 million years ago during the Ordovician period. These ancient crinoids were all stalked forms, permanently attached to the seafloor. They lived in shallow seas that covered much of the continents, seas very different from today's oceans. The water was warmer, the chemistry was different. The other organisms sharing the seas were primitive by modern standards, including early fish, trilobites, and strange arthropods that have no living descendants. Despite these differences, the basic crinoid body plan worked. It worked so well that crinoids diversified explosively, becoming some of the most abundant animals in the Paleozoic seas. By the Carboniferous and Permian periods, crinoid gardens covered vast areas of the seafloor. Their remains accumulated in such quantities that entire limestone formations, hundreds of meters thick, are composed almost entirely of crinoid fossils. These crinoid limestones are found on every continent, testament to the global dominance of these filter-feeding echinoderms. But then came the Permian-Triassic extinction, the greatest mass extinction in Earth's history. About 252 million years ago, a series of catastrophic events, possibly including massive volcanic eruptions, climate change, and ocean acidification, wiped out over 90% of all marine species. The crinoids were devastated. Most lineages went extinct. The shallow water meadows of sea lilies vanished almost entirely. Only a handful of lineages survived, retreating to deeper water. From those survivors, the modern crinoids evolved, and it was during this recovery period, in the Mesozoic era, that feather stars first appeared. The innovation of shedding the stalk and becoming free-living opened up new ecological opportunities. Feather stars could exploit habitats that stalked sea lilies couldn't, such as steep reef faces, overhangs, and areas with strong currents. They could move to follow food sources or escape unfavorable conditions. This flexibility allowed them to diversify and spread. Today, feather stars are far more diverse than stalked sea lilies. While only a few dozen species of sea lilies still exist, all of them in deep water, there are over 600 species of feather stars, occupying habitats from the shallowest reefs to the deepest trenches. They are the success story of the crinoid lineage, proof that adaptation and innovation can overcome even the most catastrophic setbacks. Paleontologists study crinoid fossils not just to understand the animals themselves, but also to reconstruct ancient environments. Because crinoids are so abundant in the fossil record, and because they are sensitive to environmental conditions like water depth, temperature, and oxygen levels, their fossils can provide valuable clues about what the ancient oceans were like. A rock formation rich in crinoid fossils suggests a shallow, warm sea with good water circulation and abundant food. A formation lacking crinoids might indicate deeper water, low oxygen, or other unfavorable conditions. Crinoid fossils are also beautiful. The calcified ossicles that make up their stems and arms preserve well, and they often show intricate patterns and structures. Collectors prize well-preserved crinoid fossils, and they are common finds in certain rock formations. In some places, you can walk along a stream bed and find hundreds of tiny crinoid stem segments, each one a perfect little disc with a star-shaped hole in the center. These are the remnants of animals that lived and died hundreds of millions of years ago, their bodies becoming part of the rock, their story preserved in stone. The relationship between feather stars and humans is mostly one of aesthetic appreciation. Unlike many marine animals, feather stars have little direct economic value. They aren't harvested for food. They don't produce any compounds that are commercially valuable, at least not yet. They aren't kept in aquariums except by the most dedicated and specialized hobbyists, as they are extremely difficult to maintain in captivity. Feather stars require specific water flow, constant supplies of appropriately sized plankton, and stable conditions, all of which are challenging to provide in a home aquarium. But divers and underwater photographers love them. Feather stars are photogenic, with their bright colors and graceful forms. A well-composed photograph of a feather star can be stunning, especially if it captures the animal in motion or if it includes the tiny commensal shrimp or squat lobsters. Macro photographers in particular seek out feather stars, spending long minutes hovering in the water, waiting for the perfect shot of a crinoid shrimp or a clingfish hiding among the arms. These images help raise awareness about reef biodiversity and the beauty of lesser-known marine animals. Scientists study feather stars for various reasons. Some are interested in their evolution and how they relate to other echinoderms. Others focus on their ecology, studying what they eat, where they live, and how they interact with other organisms. Still others examine their physiology, investigating how they regenerate lost limbs, how their nervous systems work, or how they produce their vibrant colors. Each study adds a small piece to our understanding of these remarkable animals. One area of particular interest is the biomechanics of feather star swimming. How does an animal with dozens of independently moving arms coordinate them to produce thrust? Researchers have used high-speed cameras and computer modeling to analyze the swimming motion in detail. They've found that feather stars use a complex pattern of arm movements, with different arms beating at slightly different times to create a smooth, continuous stroke. The motion is similar in some ways to the swimming of jellyfish or squid, but uniquely adapted to the feather star's radial body plan. Understanding this could have applications in robotics or the design of underwater vehicles. Another area of research focuses on the chemical compounds feather stars produce. Some species are known to contain bioactive substances, including polyketides and other secondary metabolites. These compounds may serve as chemical defenses against predators or parasites, but they might also have other uses. Some marine natural products have proven to be valuable as pharmaceuticals, providing the basis for new drugs. While no feather star compounds have yet been developed into medicines, it's possible that future research could uncover something useful. The symbiotic relationships between feather stars and their associates are also a rich area of study. How do the shrimp and squat lobsters find their host feather stars? How do they match their coloration so precisely? How do they benefit the feather star, if at all? These questions are difficult to answer, because the animals are small, cryptic, and live in complex reef environments where controlled experiments are challenging. But researchers are making progress, using molecular techniques to identify species, tracking the movements of tagged individuals, and conducting laboratory studies to observe behaviors in detail. Climate change poses a significant threat to feather stars, as it does to all reef organisms. Rising ocean temperatures stress corals, leading to bleaching and die-offs. When the corals die, the reef structure degrades, and the habitats that feather stars depend on disappear. Ocean acidification makes it harder for calcifying organisms to build and maintain their skeletons. Feather stars with their calcified ossicles could be affected. If the water becomes too acidic, they may not be able to grow properly or repair damage, making them more vulnerable to predation and environmental stress. Pollution is another concern. Sediment runoff from coastal development can smother reefs and clog the feeding apparatus of filter feeders like feather stars. Chemical pollution, including fertilizers, pesticides, and industrial waste, can poison marine life or disrupt their reproductive systems. And plastic pollution, which is pervasive in the world's oceans, can be ingested by filter feeders, potentially causing internal damage. Overfishing, while not directly targeting feather stars, can have indirect effects. When large predatory fish are removed from a reef ecosystem, the balance of the food web shifts. Populations of smaller fish and invertebrates may explode, leading to overgrazing of algae or depletion of plankton. Or the loss of predators might allow feather star predators to increase, putting more pressure on feather star populations. Healthy reef ecosystems depend on intact food webs, and disrupting those webs can have cascading effects. Despite these threats, there is reason for hope. Marine protected areas where fishing and other extractive activities are restricted or banned have proven effective at allowing reef ecosystems to recover. Studies show that reefs within protected areas have higher biodiversity, more abundant fish populations, and healthier coral cover than reefs outside protected areas. And while feather stars themselves are rarely the focus of conservation efforts, they benefit when the reefs they live on are protected. Public awareness is also growing. More people than ever before are interested in marine conservation, are learning about the importance of healthy oceans, and are taking action to reduce their impact. Beach cleanups remove trash from coastlines. Sustainable seafood choices reduce pressure on fish populations. Efforts to reduce carbon emissions address the root cause of climate change. These actions, multiplied across millions of people, can make a real difference. In some parts of the world, traditional ecological knowledge is being combined with modern science to protect reefs. Indigenous and local communities who have lived alongside the ocean for generations often have deep understanding of reef ecology and sustainable practices. By incorporating this knowledge into conservation planning, we can develop strategies that are more effective and more culturally appropriate. Feather stars also play a role in education. They are charismatic, if little known, ambassadors for reef conservation. When people see photographs or videos of feather stars, when they learn about their ancient lineage and their remarkable abilities, they often become more interested in protecting the oceans. Schools, aquariums, and nature centers use images and information about feather stars to teach children about biodiversity, evolution, and the importance of healthy ecosystems. Every person who learns about feather stars and shares that knowledge with others helps build a broader constituency for ocean conservation. The scientific classification of feather stars is complex and constantly evolving. Traditionally, feather stars were divided into several families based on morphological characteristics like the number and arrangement of arms, the structure of the cirri, and the shape of the calyx. But as molecular techniques have become more sophisticated, allowing scientists to analyze DNA sequences and reconstruct evolutionary relationships, the classification has been revised multiple times. Some groups that were thought to be closely related turned out to be distantly related, and vice versa. New families have been erected. Old families have been split or merged. This kind of taxonomic revision is normal in biology. Our understanding of evolutionary relationships is always provisional, always subject to revision as new evidence becomes available. And for feather stars, there is still much to learn. Many species are known from only a handful of specimens. Some have never been seen alive. Their distributions, behaviors, and ecological roles are poorly understood. There are likely many species still undiscovered, particularly in deep water and remote locations. Describing a new species is a painstaking process. It involves collecting specimens, often from difficult-to-reach locations, preserving them carefully, and examining them in mid-detail under a microscope. Every aspect of the animal's anatomy must be documented and compared with known species. Measurements are taken, photographs are made, detailed drawings illustrate key features. DNA is extracted and sequenced. The data are analyzed to determine whether the specimens represent a new species or a variant of a known species. If it is new, it must be formally described in a scientific publication, with a name assigned according to the rules of zoological nomenclature. The names given to species often reflect some characteristic of the animal, the location where it was found, or a person the discoverer wishes to honor. Some feather star species have wonderfully descriptive names. Comaster multifidus, for instance, refers to the animal's many branching arms. Antidon bifida describes the twofold branching pattern. Tropiometra carinata refers to the tropical region where it lives and the keel-like structures on its body. These names, while technical, carry meaning and history, connecting the modern animals to the long tradition of scientific exploration and discovery. As you imagine these feather stars, scattered across reefs and seafloors around the world, each species with its own story, its own adaptations, its own place in the web of life, there's a sense of profound interconnectedness. Nothing in the ocean exists in isolation. Every organism is linked to others through feeding relationships, symbiosis, competition, and shared habitat. The feather star-eating plankton is eating organisms that fed on phytoplankton, which got their energy from the sun. The feather star is in turn eaten by fish, which are eaten by larger fish, which may be eaten by sharks or marine mammals. When the feather star dies, its body feeds scavengers and decomposers, returning nutrients to the water where they can be used by plankton to grow again. It's a cycle, endlessly repeated, energy and matter flowing through the ecosystem, connecting everything. And humans are part of this web too, whether we realize it or not. The ocean produces much of the oxygen we breathe. It regulates the climate. It provides food for billions of people. It offers recreation, inspiration, and spiritual connection. When we damage the ocean, we damage ourselves. When we protect the ocean, we protect our own future. Feather stars, small and seemingly insignificant, are part of that larger picture. Their health reflects the health of the ocean. Their survival is intertwined with our own. The arms of a feather star, when you look at them closely, are marvels of biological engineering. Each arm contains a nerve cord that runs along its length, coordinating the movements of the tube feet and pinnules. There are also water vascular canals, part of the hydraulic system that echinoderms use for movement and feeding. The tube feet are connected to this system, and water pressure can be adjusted to extend or retract them. Along the arm are muscles, small bands of tissue that can contract to curl the arm or hold it rigid. And of course there are the ossicles, the calcified plates that give the arm its structure. These ossicles are remarkable in themselves. They are made of calcium carbonate in the form of calcite, the same mineral that makes up limestone and marble. But in a living feather star, the ossicles are not solid chunks of calcite. Instead, they have a complex porous structure, almost like a sponge made of stone. This porosity makes them light and flexible while still providing strength. The ossicles are connected by ligaments made of a special kind of tissue called mutable collagenous tissue, which can change its properties rapidly. Under nervous control, this tissue can switch from soft and flexible to stiff and rigid, allowing the feather star to lock its arms in position or relax them as needed. This ability to change tissue stiffness is one of the unique features of echinoderms. It's what allows starfish to pry open clamshells with their arms, maintaining steady pressure for hours without tiring. It's what allows brittle stars to cling tightly to rocks in pounding surf. And it's what allows feather stars to hold their arms outstretched in strong currents, filtering water efficiently, without the energy cost of continuous muscular contraction. The tissue is stiff when it needs to be, flexible when it doesn't. It's an elegant solution to a mechanical problem. The pinnules, those small feathery branches on each arm, are also structurally complex. Each pinnule has its own set of ossicles, its own ligaments, its own muscles and nerves. It can move independently of the main arm, curling inward to protect delicate tube feet or extending outward to maximize the filtering surface. The tube feet on the pinnules are covered in a mucus layer that is constantly being produced and renewed. The mucus is sticky, trapping particles, but it's also being swept along by the cilia, carrying the trapped particles toward the feeding grooves. Old mucus is discarded and replaced. It's a continuous process, happening every moment the feather star is feeding. The sensory capabilities of feather stars, while different from our own, are finely tuned to their environment. They can detect minute vibrations in the water, alerting them to the approach of predators. They can sense changes in water chemistry, perhaps detecting the chemical signals released by injured feather stars nearby, warning them of danger. They respond to touch immediately, a survival necessity when you're a soft-bodied animal without armor or weapons. And they can detect light, even though they don't have eyes, allowing them to sense the cycle of day and night and adjust their behavior accordingly. Some research suggests that feather stars may also be able to detect magnetic fields, using them for orientation or navigation. This hasn't been proven definitively, but other marine animals, including certain fish and crustaceans, are known to have magnetic sense. If feather stars possess it too, it might help them orient themselves relative to the Earth's magnetic field, maintaining a consistent position on the reef or navigating during their slow crawls from one location to another. The digestive system of a feather star is relatively simple. The mouth leads to a short esophagus, which opens into a stomach. The stomach has glands that secrete digestive enzymes, breaking down the food particles into nutrients that can be absorbed. The intestine completes the digestion, and waste is expelled through the anus, also located on the upper surface of the body near the mouth. Because feather stars eat continuously, the digestive process is ongoing. Food is constantly moving through the system, being processed and absorbed. The nutrients absorbed are distributed throughout the body by the coelomic fluid, a liquid that fills the body cavity. This fluid circulates through channels and cavities, carrying oxygen, nutrients, and waste products. It's not blood in the sense that vertebrates have blood, but it serves a similar function. The circulation is driven partly by the beating of cilia lining the coelomic cavities and partly by the movements of the body and arms. When the feather star swims or crawls, the motion helps mix and circulate the coelomic fluid. Respiration in feather stars occurs primarily through diffusion across the thin-walled tube feet and pinnules. Oxygen dissolved in the seawater passes through these thin membranes into the coelomic fluid, and carbon dioxide passes out. Because the surface area of the arms and pinnules is so large, this passive exchange is sufficient to meet the animal's metabolic needs. Feather stars don't have gills or lungs, they simply let the ocean breathe for them. The feather star's immune system, while not well studied, must be effective at defending against parasites and pathogens. Living in the ocean, constantly exposed to bacteria, viruses, and other microorganisms, feather stars need ways to prevent infection. They likely have specialized immune cells that patrol the coelomic fluid, engulfing and destroying foreign particles. They may also produce antimicrobial compounds that kill or inhibit pathogens. Some of the chemical compounds found in feather star tissues might serve this defensive function. When night falls on the reef and the feather stars emerge, they are not the only animals that change their behavior. The entire reef community shifts. Fish that were active during the day retreat into crevices to sleep. Other fish, nocturnal species with large eyes adapted to low light, emerge to hunt. Octopuses prowl the reef, searching for crabs and sleeping fish. Moray eels leave their lairs and swim through the coral, searching for prey. Basket stars, relatives of feather stars, unfurl their intricately branched arms to feed. And everywhere smaller creatures, shrimp and crabs and worms and mollusks, go about their nighttime routines, feeding, mating, hiding from predators. The reef at night is a different world, quieter in some ways, more active in others. The sounds change. During the day, you hear the crunching of parrotfish beaks on coral, the snapping of shrimp, the occasional grunt or click from fish. At night, the sounds are softer, more subtle. The rustling of arms and legs as animals move, the faint scratching of crabs walking on rock, the low hum of countless small creatures going about their business. It's a soundscape of quiet activity, of life continuing in the darkness. And the light changes too. Even on the darkest night, the ocean is not completely black. There are stars above, and their light penetrates the shallow water, creating a faint silvery glow. The moon, if it's up, adds its own illumination, turning the water a deep midnight blue. And then there's the bioluminescence. Diner flashlates in the water flash when disturbed, creating sparks and trails of light with every movement. Conch jellies drift past, their rows of cilia refracting light into rainbow patterns. Certain fish have glowing organs. The reef at night is full of light, just not the kind we're used to. For a feather star, this is home. This is the environment it evolved in, the conditions it's adapted to. The darkness doesn't hinder it. It doesn't need to see to feed. It simply spreads its arms and trusts the current to bring food. It responds to touch, to chemical signals, to vibrations, to all the sensory cues that matter in its world. And it does what it has done for millions of years, patiently, persistently, efficiently extracting a living from the ocean. There's something meditative about that constancy. In a world that often feels chaotic and unpredictable, there's comfort in knowing that somewhere, on some reef, feather stars are doing what they've always done. The sun sets, they emerge, they feed. The sun rises, they retreat. Day after day, year after year, generation after generation. It's a rhythm that transcends our human timescales, a pattern that connects the present to the deep past and extends into the future. As you let yourself relax deeper into rest, imagine that rhythm, the slow unfurling of arms, the patient filtering of water, the gentle sway in the current. There's no hurry, no deadline, just the steady, continuous work of living. And when the work is done, when the sun begins to rise, there's rest. The arms curl inward, the body tucks into safety, and the feather star sleeps, if sleep is the right word, waiting for night to come again. You too can rest now. You've journeyed through the world of feather stars, from their ancient origins to their modern diversity, from shallow reefs to deep seas, from their elegant anatomy to their complex relationships with other organisms. You've seen them through the eyes of divers and scientists, through the lens of evolution and ecology, and perhaps you've gained a new appreciation for these remarkable animals, these drifting flowers of the night reef. The geographic distribution of feather stars spans the entire globe, from the Arctic to the Antarctic, from the shallowest tide pools to the deepest ocean trenches, but they are not evenly distributed. Feather star diversity is highest in the tropical Indo-Pacific region, particularly in the waters around Indonesia, the Philippines, and the Great Barrier Reef. This region, sometimes called the Coral Triangle, is the epicenter of marine biodiversity for many groups of organisms, not just feather stars. The warm, clear water, abundant coral reefs, and complex topography create ideal conditions for a wide variety of species to coexist. In these waters, a single reef might host 20, 30, even 40 different species of feather stars. They occupy different niches, different depths, different microhabitats. Some prefer the reef crest where the current is strongest. Others are found in sheltered lagoons or on sandy bottoms between coral patches. Some live in shallow water just a few meters deep. Others are found only below 30 meters, in the deeper, dimmer zones of the reef. This kind of niche partitioning allows many species to coexist without competing directly for resources. Move away from the tropics, and feather star diversity decreases. Temperate waters have fewer species, though those that are present can still be abundant. In the Mediterranean Sea, for instance, there are several species of feather stars, including Antidon mediterranea, which is common on rocky reefs and seagrass beds. These temperate species are often smaller and less colorful than their tropical relatives, though they are no less interesting in their biology and ecology. In cold waters, including the Arctic and Antarctic, feather stars become increasingly rare. The frigid temperatures and seasonal variations in light and food availability create challenging conditions. But some species have adapted. Antarctic crinoids are known from deep water, living on the continental shelf and slope. They tend to be larger and slower growing than tropical species, adaptations to the cold, low-energy environment. Their larvae have longer development times, and their reproductive cycles may span multiple years. Life in the Antarctic is slow, but it persists. The specific habitat requirements of each species determine where it can live. Some feather stars are generalists, able to thrive in a variety of conditions. They might be found on different types of substrate, at different depths in different current regimes. These species tend to have wide geographic ranges, sometimes spanning multiple ocean basins. Other species are specialists, requiring very specific conditions to survive. They might live only on one type of coral, or only at a particular depth range, or only in areas with a certain current speed. These specialist species tend to have smaller geographic ranges and are more vulnerable to environmental change. Human activities have influenced the distribution of feather stars in some areas. In regions where reefs have been degraded by pollution, overfishing, or coastal development, feather star populations have declined or disappeared. In other areas, particularly marine protected areas, feather star populations have remained healthy or even increased as reef conditions have improved. Monitoring these populations can provide valuable information about the overall health of the reef ecosystem. The patterns of feather star diversity across the ocean also reflect the history of the Earth's continents and ocean basins. Millions of years ago, the continents were arranged differently. Ocean currents flowed in different patterns. Climate zones were shifted as the continents drifted and the ocean basins reconfigured. Feather star populations became isolated or mixed, leading to the evolution of new species in some areas and the extinction of others in different regions. The feather stars we see today are the result of this long, complex history of geological change and biological evolution. Some species of feather stars have remarkably wide distributions. They might be found across the entire Pacific Ocean, from Japan to Australia to Hawaii. This wide distribution could be the result of larval dispersal, with larvae drifting on ocean currents for extended periods, allowing them to colonize distant locations. Or it might reflect the ability of the species to tolerate a wide range of conditions, allowing it to survive in many different environments. Wide-ranging species tend to be more resilient to environmental change because if conditions become unfavorable in one part of their range, populations in other areas may persist. Other species are endemic, found only in a single location or a small geographic area. Island chains like Hawaii or the Galapagos have endemic feather star species that evolved in isolation and are found nowhere else on Earth. These endemic species are particularly vulnerable to extinction because if their habitat is destroyed or their population declines, there are no other populations elsewhere to replenish them. Conservation of endemic species requires protecting their specific habitats and ensuring that local threats are managed carefully. The ocean currents play a crucial role in connecting feather star populations. Larvae released by adults in one location can be carried hundreds or even thousands of kilometers by currents before settling. This larval dispersal is the primary way that feather stars colonize new areas and maintain genetic connectivity between distant populations. But not all currents are equally effective at dispersing larvae. Some currents are fast and strong, potentially carrying larvae far beyond suitable habitat. Others flow consistently between suitable habitats, facilitating connectivity. Scientists use genetic techniques to study the connectivity between feather star populations. By analyzing DNA from individuals collected at different locations, they can determine how much gene flow is occurring between populations. High gene flow suggests that larvae are successfully dispersing and reproducing in new locations. Low gene flow suggests that populations are isolated, evolving independently. This information is valuable for conservation planning because it helps identify populations that are genetically distinct and might require special protection. Temperature is one of the most important factors limiting feather star distribution. Each species has an optimal temperature range where it thrives and grows most efficiently. Outside this range, the animal may survive but will be stressed, growing more slowly and reproducing less successfully. If temperatures become too extreme, the animal dies. As ocean temperatures rise due to climate change, the temperature ranges suitable for each species are shifting. Some species may expand their ranges poleward, colonizing areas that were previously too cold. Others may lose habitat as their preferred temperature zones move or disappear. Salinity, the concentration of salt in the water, also affects feather star distribution. Most feather stars are fully marine organisms, adapted to the salinity of normal seawater. They cannot tolerate the lower salinities found in estuaries or areas with high freshwater input. This limits their distribution and excludes them from many coastal habitats. However, some species are more tolerant of salinity variation and can live in areas where salinity fluctuates seasonally. Oxygen concentration is another critical factor. Feather stars, like all animals, need oxygen to survive. In areas where oxygen levels are low, such as in certain deep basins or upwelling zones, feather stars may be absent or rare. Hypoxic zones, areas with very low oxygen, are increasing in some parts of the ocean due to nutrient pollution and warming waters. This expansion of low oxygen areas could reduce the available habitat for feather stars and other marine animals. The substrate, the surface that feather stars attach to, is also important. Feather stars need firm substrate to grip with their cirri. Hard coral, rock, dead coral rubble, and the surfaces of sponges and sea fans all provide suitable attachment points. Soft sediment, like sand or mud, does not. This is why feather stars are typically found on reefs and rocky areas rather than on soft bottom habitats. However, some deep-sea feather stars have evolved specialized cirri that can anchor in soft sediment, allowing them to exploit habitats that other species cannot. Depth influences feather star distribution through multiple pathways. It affects light availability, temperature, pressure, and the types of organisms present. Shallow water species live in a world of relatively bright light, warm temperatures, and lower pressures. Deep-sea species experience perpetual darkness, cold, and crushing pressures. Each depth zone has its own community of organisms, its own ecological dynamics. Feather stars, being members of these communities, reflect the characteristics of their depth zone. Some species have narrow depth ranges, found only within a band of 10 or 20 meters. Others have wide depth ranges, occurring from shallow water all the way down to several hundred meters. Species with wide depth ranges must be physiologically flexible, able to tolerate the different conditions found at different depths. This flexibility may come at a cost, though. Generalists often can't compete as well with specialists in any particular environment, but they benefit from having more habitat available to them. The concept of the ecological niche is central to understanding feather star distribution. A niche is not just a physical location, but the entire set of conditions and resources that a species needs to survive and reproduce. It includes the type of substrate, the depth range, the temperature, the current speed, the availability of food, the presence of predators and competitors, and more. Each species occupies a unique niche, and the differences between niches are what allow multiple species to coexist in the same area. Competition between species can also influence distribution. If two species have very similar niche requirements, they may compete for food, attachment sites, or other resources. In some cases, one species may outcompete the other, excluding it from that habitat. In other cases, the species may coexist by partitioning the resources, with each species specializing slightly differently. This kind of competitive interaction shapes community structure and influences which species are found where. Predation pressure varies across habitats and can influence where feather stars are abundant. On reefs with high densities of feather star predators like fish or sea urchins, feather star populations may be suppressed. On reefs with fewer predators, feather stars may be more abundant. This creates a mosaic of habitats across the ocean, some favorable for feather stars, others less so. Understanding these patterns helps ecologists predict how feather star communities might respond to changes in predator populations due to fishing or other human impacts. Feather stars can serve as indicator species for reef health. Because they are sensitive to environmental conditions and require clean water and suitable substrate, their presence suggests that the reef is in relatively good condition. Conversely, their absence might indicate problems like pollution, sedimentation, or habitat degradation. Monitoring feather star populations over time can provide early warning of environmental changes that might affect other reef organisms as well. The relationship between feather stars and coral health is particularly important. Healthy coral reefs provide the complex three-dimensional structure that feather stars need for attachment and shelter. When corals bleach and die, the reef structure begins to degrade. Dead coral is colonized by algae, which can be slippery and difficult for feather stars to grip. Over time, wave action and biological erosion break down the dead coral skeletons, reducing the availability of suitable attachment sites. As the reef flattens and simplifies, feather star habitat disappears. But the relationship goes both ways. When feather stars are abundant and feeding actively, they help keep the water clear by filtering out plankton and particles. Clear water allows more sunlight to reach the corals, supporting the photosynthetic algae that live in their tissues and provide them with energy. Clear water also reduces stress on corals, and may help them resist bleaching during warm periods. So feather stars in their small way contribute to the health of the reef that supports them. The future of feather stars, like the future of all marine life, is uncertain. The ocean is changing rapidly, faster than at any time in human history. Temperatures are rising, chemistry is shifting, habitats are being destroyed. Species are going extinct at rates not seen since the last mass extinction 65 million years ago. But there are also reasons for optimism. People are becoming more aware of the problems and more motivated to act. Marine protected areas are expanding, pollution controls are being strengthened. Efforts to reduce greenhouse gas emissions, while insufficient so far, are growing. Feather stars have survived for over 500 million years. They've weathered mass extinctions, ice ages, asteroid impacts, and dramatic shifts in ocean chemistry and temperature. They are resilient, they are adaptable, but resilience has limits. If we continue to degrade the ocean at the current rate, even ancient lineages like the crinoids may not be able to adapt fast enough. Some species will go extinct. Ecosystems will change. The ocean of the future may be very different from the ocean we know today. But it doesn't have to be that way. We have the knowledge and the tools to protect the ocean. What we need is the will. Every action matters. Every choice we make, from what seafood we eat to how we vote to how we use energy, affects the ocean. And every person who learns about the ocean, who comes to appreciate its beauty and diversity, becomes part of the solution. Feather stars, with their elegance and their ancient lineage, can inspire that appreciation. They remind us that the ocean is full of wonders worth protecting. As the night deepens and you drift closer to sleep, let your mind return one last time to the reef. The water is warm and clear. The current flows gently. Above, the stars shine through the surface, their light bending and wavering as it passes through the water. Below, the reef is alive with quiet activity, and there, anchored to a coral head, arms spread wide, is a feather star, red and gold in the beam of your imaginary dive light, swaying gently, feeding patiently, a living link to an ancient past and an uncertain future. It doesn't know you're watching. It doesn't care. It simply does, what it has always done, filtering the night water, extracting a living from the ocean's endless flow. And in that simple, persistent act, there is a kind of wisdom, a reminder that survival is not about being the biggest or the fastest or the smartest. It's about finding your niche, adapting to your environment, and persisting through whatever changes come. The feather star will be there tomorrow night, and the night after, and the night after that, as long as the reef remains. And if we do our part, if we protect the ocean and give it a chance to heal and thrive, the feather stars will still be there generations from now, still unfurling their arms at dusk, still filtering the night water, still connecting the present to the deep past. They are a gift from ancient seas, a reminder of what the ocean was and what it could still be, a drifting flower in the darkness, beautiful and fragile and enduring. Rest now, let go. The feather stars are where they need to be, doing what they need to do, and you are where you need to be too, drifting gently towards sleep, carried by the current of your own breath, settling into the darkness like a feather star, settling into its hiding place at dawn, safe, still, at peace. The ocean will be there in the morning. The feather stars will emerge again tomorrow night, and you will wake refreshed, ready for whatever comes. Sleep well. Dream of drifting flowers and ancient seas. Dream of arms unfurling in the darkness. A dream of life persisting, quietly, beautifully, endlessly. Good night.